Oh, and Gracia Avila Merwin is not running the show today. Yours truly is. For some reason, StreamYard um, attached to her account. So don't know why. Grace and I both share the same StreamYard account. Joe and I had this example or had this problem when we first started this because him and I were sharing the same syndicate StreamYard account. And some days it would just lock up, even though it was Joe's show and it was saying Tony's going live, and then vice versa. So we'll figure out, maybe it's a cookie or something. I don't know. But anyway, doesn't matter. I'm here. It's Tuesday. It's time for some training. And we've got a smoking hot show for you guys today. Got a little bit of news I'm going to go through. I'm not going to take too much time, but I did see some articles that I felt like were pretty relevant for the Medicare industry that I want to bounce to a little bit. And then we will jump into our training topic today, which, if you saw the thumbnail, is on the 3 types of learners. Right? Regardless of what you're teaching someone, there are basically 3 types of learners for how they learn information. And we're going to dive through them, understand what those different learners are, how they learn, as well as look at some engagement strategies for the best way to engage those learners, right? So going to be a good topic if you're out there and whether you want to get a better understanding of how you better absorb and learn material, it's going to be great. And if you are coaching people, training agents, whatever it might be, this is going to be valuable material because it's going to help you learn, hey, how can I better coach people and adapt to their learning style? So kind of like the 5 love languages, right? If you've ever heard of the 5 love languages, the whole idea or concept of the book is that you learn to speak in your partner's love language. Same concept with these 3 learning styles. Right? It gives you the ability to learn to speak or teach in the learning style that your trainee is best speaks and is going to learn. So that's what we're going to dive into. Before we jump in, as always, this show is sponsored by MetaZeus. MetaZeus is easily the leading platform. I think it's actually the only platform out there available to independent agents so that they can constantly monitor their Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plan book. It's a phenomenal tool. I use it regularly. The best time I would say that you will find advantageous use of this tool is going to be during AEP and OEP when plan flips are a little more rampant. But MetaZeus will allow you to monitor your book, and it will tell you in 24 to 48 hours if you had a plan that got flipped by telling you what the old plan was, what the new plan and the effective date is, and it also verifies LIS levels. You only need 2 pieces of data. You need their Medicare number and their date of birth. If you have all that, it'll verify everything for you. It's a smoking hot tool. You can even upload an entire CSV file of your 1,000 clients, put them in there, and spit out a report to monitor who's getting flipped and who's not. So great tool. If you ever want to check it out, give Evan McGuffey a holler in our group. He's one of the members here. He'll get you a demo and I believe even a free trial to check it out. And if you like it, which you probably will, get enrolled. It's only $89 a month, man. Basically 3 apps a year. And I saved 7 apps just this last AEP. So it's easily paid for itself multiple times over. Now, with that said, let's just jump into a wee bit of news real quick. First up to bat. And I'm going to move through these pretty quick because I really want to get into our training topic. But you may have seen this. This is straight from NPR. Medicare plans now cover Wegovy for patients at risk of heart disease. What the hell is Wegovy? Well, Wegovy is a GLP-1 agonist. In other words, it's an obesity drug, right? And Medicare will not approve Wegovy as covered if you're only taking it for weight loss. So it has to be prescribed to prevent heart attacks and strokes. When prescribed to prevent heart attacks and strokes, you will get Medicare coverage on it. So that just got passed. Interesting stuff there. We're going to continue to see things like this with these new weight loss drugs that are out there. So again, when people are wanting to take it just for weight loss, it ain't covered. But if you need to take it as prescribed for preventing heart disease or strokes, it's covered. Moving along, out of Fierce Healthcare. You've probably heard about this cyber attack that happened not too long ago with Change Healthcare. Right? They had a massive cyber attack, ransomware attack. There was problems with not only people's data getting out, but there was a huge disruption in reimbursement to pharmaceutical companies, pharmacies, doctors, hospitals, etc. And now that they've got it sorted out, they are in the process of processing 14 billion in claims that were backlogged because of this. So if you've heard of people out there that are having claims delays, maybe they're with United Healthcare, Change Healthcare, whatever it might be, hopefully some of that stuff will be getting cleared up quickly. But it's pretty amazing. They had 14 billion in claims that are backlogged. You can run through this and kind of go through. They have an estimated timeline, all kinds of info. I'll get this in the group. If you've got some people that you think were affected, you can certainly use this kind of to help you kind of figure out and give them a timeline of what's going on there. So interesting stuff there. Moving along. You've heard, I'm sure if you're in the Medicare Advantage space, you've heard of prior authorization being a big problem. They have been working to streamline and address prior authorization issues, and they created this little impact brief, which we'll open up here real quick. Pretty simple little infographic, and it basically explains a couple of issues where there were denials or delays for Medicare Advantage enrollees. They give an example here of a 76-year-old man with post-polio syndrome who was denied prior authorization request for a medically necessary walker. Estimated cost an entire $112 because he had already had a cane that he had received within the past 5 years. Another example was a physician-ordered MRI to assess why a 69-year-old's pain and weakness continued 5 months after a fall. The MRI request was denied by the insurance company because the patient had not already had an x-ray first. That doesn't necessarily sound like a prior authorization problem, but maybe, just a process issue that the doctor could have followed better. But nonetheless, this little infographic sheet here goes through a little bit of the timeline of some of the things that CMS has done as far as when they've implemented regulatory changes and so forth. Not a ton of information in it, but a nice little piece to kind of give you an idea of some of the stuff that they're working on in the Office of Inspector General's Oversight Committee to address potential prior authorization problems. Keeping it moving. We're going to keep it moving just like the Black Keys at a concert, man. They don't waste any time. So this is a pretty good little article by ARP. And really, it's going to explain a very simple thing. Medicare decisions are often made in tandem by couples, right? Basically, they're saying that couples that change their Medicare plans, if one changes, the other one changes. They're usually doing all this in tandem. And you go through it, it gives you some really interesting stats. They studied 1,800 couples that were enrolled in MA plans and found that most of them stick together when it comes to choosing their health coverage. For example, what they found, 79%, a little over 79%, 79.7% of Partner A individuals remained in the same Medicare Advantage plan for the next year. Among hosts who stayed, so did 95.5% of their partners. So if one spouse in the couple doesn't change their Medicare Advantage plan in a year, there's a 95.5% chance that their partner is also not making a change, right? Next thing they found was that 17.9% of Partner A individuals who did switch to another MA plan for the next year, so did 85.6% of their partners. So if you're talking to a couple and one of them is changing their Medicare plan, you got an 85.6% chance that their partner is going to make a change as well. The final item is that 2.4% of Partner A individuals who disenrolled from Medicare Advantage and returned back to traditional Medicare, well, so did 69% of their partners. So basically, in short, when you're talking to couples, married couples, whatever it might be, spouse in the house, if one of them's moving, chances are the other one's moving too. If one of them's staying, chances are the other one's staying. So that should be some onus on you to do a little fact finding of, hey, when you find out that you are talking to a couple in a house, ask about what's going on with the spouse, right? Do we need to do a plan review for them too? Because if you don't, somebody else probably will. So I thought that was some interesting stats that show the penetration, if you will, on the amount of couples that move together when changing their plans or stick together when not changing their plans. Keeping it moving on. I've talked quite a bit about prescription drugs, the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the different drugs that are under fire or under negotiation. And now, thanks to inflation rebates, as it says here, The HHS, or Health and Human Services, has announced savings for another 41 prescription drugs under these are Part B covered drugs, not Part D as in dog, but Part B. This article will go through some of the details of the Inflation Reduction Act, yada, yada, yada. And then if you click the link down here, it will take you to this page on cms.gov, which drops all the fact sheets on the inflation rebate program. Tons of them. And it also gives you all the different drugs that have reduced coinsurance for Part B based on the dates here, right? The most recent ones that kick off April 1st. You click this link and it'll take you now to this page. Boom. Which will actually show you all the drugs and the inflation adjusted coinsurance percentage. Some of these are not enormous savings. For example, if you look at the top one here, Abelset, normally it's a 20% coinsurance. Well, they've got it down to 19.92%. So it's a 0.08% savings, not a big deal. You look at some of the other ones, like say this one down here, Fosaprepitant, or Tiva, as its brand name is called, normally a 20% coinsurance, now only 3.8%. So if you have some clients that are taking Part B drugs, this is good information to review because you might be able to find some instances where they are going to save substantially. In a lot of cases, they're only saving fractions, right? 1%, 0.08%, 0.5%, whatever. But in some cases, there are some pretty big savings in there, so it might be worth reviewing. Pretty simple. That is the news, right? That is the news. And I want to say that, number one, I appreciate all you guys tuning in. We have some really good material that we're about to jump into here for you real quick. I am super excited to actually cover this topic because it's something that I hadn't learned until about 12 years ago. And I actually learned it in a martial arts class. I was doing some Kung Fu training and my teacher clearly explained this concept to me and the light bulb kind of went off. Now, I want to be really clear. This has nothing to do with martial arts. I'm not about to slap y'all with some Kung Fu metaphor for sales training. That was just the context that I learned this concept of the three types of learners. If you think you know who the different types of learners are, drop them in the comments. Let's see what you know. But I'm excited to talk about this one. Because I believe that no matter what you're teaching someone, whether you're teaching them insurance sales, whether you're teaching them maybe how to ride a bike or whatever it might be, right? A recipe to a dish. These learning styles are very prevalent. And what you will find in looking at them is that not only will you gravitate to a certain learning style that's going to help you absorb material quicker, right? But you're going to see that there are certain topics that are going to lend themselves more to maybe one learning style over the other. And you'll certainly learn how people learn, right? So how you can better coach people. And you were pretty close there, Facebook user, as one of them, a kinetic learner. Great guess. You're pretty close. You're basically right on it. Just not quite the right conjugation of that word. So jumping right into it, what are those three learners? Well, we have the visual learner, right? We have the auditory learner, and we have the kinesthetic learner. Kinetic's pretty close. Kinesthetic is the actual word that they're using here, but same concept, right? So you have a visual learner, you have an auditory learner, and you have a kinesthetic learner. Fairly simple. So if we take a look at the visual learner, right? This person has a preference for visual information, right? This is the type of person that's going to absorb information best when it's presented in a visual format. Charts, graphs, diagrams, right? You see my little picture there of the tiger in there trapped in his room full of all these charts and graphs because that's how he better absorbs information, right? These people are also sensitive to color layout, and they will want to organize things by the use of color, which will help them categorize and recall information. This learning group has a very strong visual memory. They can recall visual details from presentations or maybe reading materials much more effectively than they can from maybe verbal or written instructions. All right. They also learn through observation, right? So these are the people that like to watch demonstrations. They like to watch videos because they're a visual learner. They're very effective at being able to observe and understand complex subjects without the necessary need for hands-on learning. So these are the people that like to watch you in action so that they can learn from you. Fairly simple, right? So what are some engagement strategies when we have these types of learners? Well, if we're dealing with the visual learner, we want to have some diagrams. We want to have charts, infographics included in our training material. We maybe want to do maps, right, where they can visually see how something is represented in a map or maybe a workflow diagram. We want to color code things for them so that they can better easily categorize and organize the information. We want to use videos, right? This is very common in the training world. There's a lot of agents out there that will create videos, not only to save them time from having to repeat information over and over and over, but so that these visual learners can sit there, tune into a video, and learn a complex subject. And video is definitely king right now. So if you're building training curriculum, you want to make sure that you develop material that has a lot of visual information. It's going to have charts, bullet points, graphs, all that type of information in the supplemental learning that's going to help them. And with that said, that concludes the portion of this slideshow for the visual learners, because if you're an auditory learner, these images aren't going to really apply to you. So we're back to just me now. Hope you enjoyed that. Also, I don't have enough time to develop frames for every single one of these. But moving along, an auditory learner, what is that? Well, that's someone that finds it easier to understand and retain information when they hear it, right? They remember by hearing. Pretty simple. So these people are going to benefit from lectures, from audio recordings. These people are also much better at expressing themselves verbally, right? Because they're really good at hearing and retaining information. So they're generally better at verbal communication, expressing themselves, asking good questions so that they can then get the answers that they want, which also means they have impeccable listening skills. They have a heightened listening skill because they're very good, again, as an auditory learner. They learn by hearing. So again, they're going to prefer audiobooks. They're going to prefer podcasts, etc. They will also love to do masterminds, discussion groups, repeating things out loud. Repetition in your auditory training works really well for an auditory learner. So how do we engage an auditory learner? Well, we want to use storytelling. We want to use anecdotes to make that material more engaging to them. Why is storytelling so important to an auditory learner? Because number one, they hear, right? They retain information through hearing. Telling a story not only engages that hearing mechanism, their listening skill, but a good story will also drive emotion in them. Maybe it creates a sensation of sadness, of fear, of anger, of happiness. When someone is engaged with material that stimulates their emotion, they're more likely to remember it. So storytelling will be an excellent way to get your point across and properly train an auditory learner, right? So maybe if you're teaching them about a certain insurance product, use a story on how that insurance product fits into their world, which is going to help them understand it better. These people will also, like I said, they're good at masterminds, group discussions. So if you sat in on a Wednesday call last week when we talked about some of the different leadership styles that are out there, if you run an organization through a participative leadership style where you like to bring your team together collectively for discussions, for masterminds, to kind of participate in management decisions, so to speak, an auditory learner is going to thrive in that environment because they like being involved. They like being able to discuss and hear and verbally express themselves. When you're putting together training materials, you want to include audio materials, podcasts. You can include videos as well, because it doesn't matter if they're watching the video. They're good at just hearing the video and bringing that information in. And you also want to repeat and summarize key points to reinforce that auditory learning, right? So if we're talking about an auditory learner again here, remember, this person learns by hearing, right? They learn by speaking. They learn through the sound of voice. So you want to engage them verbally. You want to engage them with storytelling, and you want to put them in situations where they can express themselves and ask questions and give feedback, because that is going to elevate their learning potential. Pretty simple. Moving on to the third one is what our Facebook user here earlier was hinting at, the kinetic learner, which is basically the kinesthetic learner. That's the technical term that they're using here, is a kinesthetic learner. What is a kinesthetic learner? That is someone that learns by doing, right? That is someone that has a preference for hands-on experience. A kinesthetic learner is going to absorb information best through direct hands-on experience, right? They prefer to be actively doing something rather than passively sitting and watching. I am a pretty strong kinesthetic learner. And this is when I mentioned this earlier, and I was like, hey, this concept was first explained to me during a martial arts training, and the light bulb really went off. Because during that session, when I was working with my trainer, he took some time to stop, and he was explaining some of the form and the movements and why the hand is positioned in a certain way and so forth. He was giving us some auditory material. And then he sat and he showed us what it looks like, right? He was giving us a visual representation. And then before he went on and made us kinesthetically practice that form and that posture, he explained these three things. Hey, that there are visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. And then when I started practicing what he was teaching me, the whole light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And I started to learn a little bit about why maybe I'm more of a kinesthetic learner than an auditory or visual, and so forth. But a kinesthetic learner is someone that also prefers movement and exploration, right? The kinesthetic is movement. That's physical exertion and movement, being engaged. So these people generally don't like to sit still for very long periods, right? These are people that you need to engage and keep them with movement, with activity. These are people that might need a break from time to time. If you had them sitting down doing some deep auditory learning or visual learning for a minute, you might need to take a break and get them moving around the office for a little bit. If you're a kinesthetic learner, think about this for a second. Have you ever been learning a subject? Maybe you're reading about it. Maybe you're hearing it through an auditory form, or maybe you're working it out in your head. Are you the type of person that paces and walks around while you're mulling that over and learning it? Probably a kinesthetic learner, right? So again, these people learn through movement, through exploration. They struggle to sit still for long periods, and they learn by doing. They understand and remember the information more effectively when they can apply it themselves practically through experiments, simulation, role play. They also appreciate the use of physical objects in their training, right? So incorporating physical objects or tools into the learning process can significantly enhance their learning ability and their ability to retain the information. And kind of going through strategies for engagement, this reminds me, use of physical objects. I remember it was when I was in Sacramento running my outdoor sales team doing sports promotions. I ran a morning meeting every day to get our team charged up. And there was a day in the morning when I got everything going, and I felt like the week just wasn't going well. I felt like my team wasn't fired up. This production was a little low, for example. And so when I ran that morning meeting, I decided to use some physical objects. I didn't do it because I knew this material. I just knew that this was going to get the point across and get my team fired up in the way I wanted it to. And it was a little over the top, but it still worked. And we had some people go out that day and make some money. And basically what I did was I ran a morning meeting where I had an old little table in the office that we weren't really using, and I brought it into the meeting room and set it down, and I put I think a 2-liter or 3-liter Coke bottle, empty Coke bottle, sitting on top of it. And I challenged everybody on the team. I think it was about 15 or 16 guys in my crew at that point. I challenged all of them. I was like, look, you have to understand that you have to give all of your energy to whatever task it is that you're trying to accomplish. You have to put your focus on it. And so I challenged them all to see if they could knock the bottle off the table, but not only just knock it off, but actually put a dent in it. Because if you have an empty 3 liter bottle that's sitting on a table and you go hit it, whether you're hitting it with the side of your hand, your fist, whatever, it's going to be really hard to dent it, because as soon as you hit it, it's empty. It's going to go flying off. So they were all having fun, challenging, trying to see if they could dent the bottle. None of them were successful. We went through it for a little bit, having some fun. They were knocking it all across the room in different ways. We'd set it back up. Somebody else would knock it off. And then I said, well, hang on, let me give it a shot. And I reached behind the training desk where I had hidden a sledgehammer that they didn't know was there. And I pulled out the sledgehammer, and not only did I dent the Coke bottle, but I wiped out the entire table that was sitting on. 2 good swings of the sledgehammer, and that whole piece was entirely destroyed. And I looked at him and I said, why are you not giving everything you've got when you go out in the day and chase your opportunity? Why are you just hacking at it? Why are you not using every tool engaged and getting fired up and going out there? So that was an example of using physical objects in a training to really get my point across. And certainly we had some bell ringers come back that day who were making hundreds of dollars in their pocket. So looking at some strategies of engagement for a kinesthetic learner, right? You want to include interactive activities. Role playing is huge for the kinesthetic learner. And if you're a sales trainer, role playing is going to be huge. Like some of our best salespeople out there are guys that constantly engage in role playing, right? And this is one of the things I love about my partner across the way, Joe, as I'm always hearing him role play with his team. And it's no surprise that his team is absolutely crushing it right now, because they are involved in that kinesthetic learning through role plays, role playing situations, scenarios, hands-on actual demonstrations. You can also build physical models, diagrams to help them understand, or encourage them, to build physical models, diagrams, things of that nature. Allow for movement and breaks. Give them some time to move around and exert some energy kinesthetically to help them free up their mental capacity to absorb more information. And again, use real life examples and case studies that require problem solving. That's going to engage that kinesthetic learner more. Now, ultimately, while you could lean on one of these pretty heavily for a given topic, right? If you're training people, or even if you were trying to learn a topic, the best way is to learn how to incorporate all 3 of these. You want to incorporate a mix of auditory, kinesthetic, and visual learning in your material when you're training someone, right? That's what is going to give them the best opportunity to retain as much information as possible in an optimum training scenario, right? So you want to, and when I think about this from the point of insurance training, sales training, whatever, think about the role that technology now plays for us in being able to present material in both a visual, or in all 3, a visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning style. I'll give you an example, right? If I'm going to, or let's go back a few years, 15 years ago, if I wanted to train someone how to quote a Medicare supplement product, or to quote a few different Medicare supplement rates for a prospective client, it was a lot different, because we had to physically go and get every single rate guide from the carriers that we wanted to look at, right? So that's my visual representation, is that outline of coverage and that rate guide. And then I kinesthetically show them how to use the rate guide to find a quote. Kinesthetically show them how to use the app, and obviously auditorily, I'm explaining all that material to them. Good way to learn. It's so much quicker now with the advent of technology, because now I don't have to use those paper guides. I can speed up the process. So now what do? I take him to my quote engine. And now with that quote engine, he can see everything in a single snapshot. So his visual learning ability is immediately stimulated, because he can see all the information, right? He can see the buttons. He can see the graphs, the charts, the data. It's represented in a very visual format. He will auditorily be able to hear me explain to him the information that is in that quote engine, how to understand it, What does it mean? How do I extrapolate it? How do I take that information and then re-explain it to another person? That's his auditory senses that are getting heightened. And then finally, the kinesthetic side of it is you show him how to run a quote. And then very quickly, in a single snapshot, one interface, you can engage someone with all three levels of learning and really help them retain that information, right? So ultimately, as you're incorporating all three of these, you want to make sure that you have the practical tools that's going to give them and stimulate their visual training. Handbooks that have visual representations, again, charts, graphs, diagrams, whatever it might be. Auditory learning, not just you talking and lecturing them, but maybe some videos where they can hear, maybe some audio, etc. And then finally, kinesthetic learning. One of the ways that I like to train agents in the kinesthetic side, other than just making them do stuff, is a lot of times I'll teach them a topic. Like, for example, go back to that quote engine. I'll teach them how to use the quote engine. And then I will give them an exam with a bunch of problems to solve. So I'll give them a bunch of scenarios for people that I need them to quote. Hey, give me a 67-year-old diabetic smoker who lives in this zip code and has, this or that. I need a quote for that. Give me this type of quote. I want these quotes, include these discounts. So once I've shown him how to use the quote engine and I've spoken about it and I've stimulated his visual and auditory, then I want to hit that kinesthetic side as well. Pretty simple. So ultimately, the key is to learning to blend all of these together, right? So visual activities, again, compelling presentations, bullet points, charts and graphs, diagrams, auditory activities, effective storytelling techniques. So when you're explaining to them why, say, a Medicare supplement might be a better fit for a certain individual, craft a story and a real life example that can stimulate that emotion to help them better remember it and understand why that is an important decision or that might be the better play. And then again, finally, kinesthetic activities, role-playing exercises, practicing sales techniques, etc., are all going to be the best way to do it. So ultimately, you want to learn those. So pretty simple. That went a lot quicker than I actually expected it. But I hope that was, that's kind of the basis of the training there, is understanding that there are three types of learners, right? Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. If you can learn all three of those and one, which type are you? And matter of fact, I'll just ask you right now, if you're in the group, which type of learner are you? Do you learn better from visual? Do you learn better from listening to things? Or do you learn better from doing things? I definitely learn better from doing things, but I still like to hear things. I listen to audiobooks regularly while I'm working out, so I'm picking up auditory material. I like this guy here. What type of learner are you? I'm a slow learner. Nothing wrong with being a slow learner. Think about here's my challenge to you. Which way, if you're the slow learner, which one of these might speed up your learning process? Looking at charts and graphs and being visual, listening to high quality material that you can absorb, or actually doing the process, doing the work, practice exams, role playing, etc. Which type of learner are you? And then if you're the guy that says, hey, I'm a slow learner, which one of those do you think will help you speed up your learning curve? And if you feel like you know that answer, well, then when you're learning a new topic, push yourself in that direction. Like, hey, I feel like, I'm a slow learner, but if I can get involved kinesthetically and role playing and practicing and engaging in the process more, I can speed up my learning curve. Or maybe like, hey, I'm a slow learner, but if I can watch a video that is a demonstration of how to do the process, I can take notes of that and I'm going to pick that up a lot faster. So learn what type of learner you are, and push yourself to using that style a little bit more often. Ultimately, you want to learn to use all three, but it's coming up with the right recipe for all three. Maybe 50% of your learning needs to be kinesthetic and 25% needs to be visual and 25% auditory. I don't know, right? But think of how I can properly blend all three of these approaches, not only when I'm trying to learn a topic, but when I'm teaching a topic. And it doesn't matter what that topic is, whether it's properly teaching a child how to plant a new tree or teaching a guy how to pick up the phone and make dials. Doesn't matter what it is. Anytime you're in the process of being a teacher, You need to learn to use all three of these: visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So that's the training. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Speaking of training, we have a new hire that starts with Avila today. Super excited to bring him on board. Gabriel's going to be a big part of our organization. I got high hopes for him because I think he's going to be solid, and I'm super excited to bring him on. He starts today. So I'm going to jump out there and start working on training him visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. With that said, have an awesome Tuesday. We'll see you next week for Tuesday training. Take it easy.